Welcome back to the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners. Issues and updates continuation from this morning. Administrator Gary Schmidt, what's up?
Thank you, Chair Smith. We're going to do this in the form of a policy session, which is regional tolling update. We have staff from Transportation and Development and Public and Government Affairs to present. I've told them they have 20 minutes tops to do the presentation, and the other 40 minutes, if you need it, is for your discussion. Dan Johnson, Director of Transportation and Development, please kick it off.
Thank you so much. Tony, would you kick off the slideshow presentation, please? Thank you. We have a PowerPoint presentation for you to consideration. We're here to do a couple things. One, information sharing, number one. And then number two, we have an ask, a discussion around how the board would like to vet this, what they're calling Nexus projects. We'll do a deeper dive into that here in 1 second. Basically, the agenda for the conversation is we want to update you on the I-205 toll project EA update. A lot of you are familiar with this, but this is a public event, so we want to make sure we get to spread the word. Second, we're going to talk about regional mobility pricing project status update. Next, ODOT's Urban Mobility Strategy Finance Plan. Discussion around the Nexus projects. And then last but not least, legislative discussion around tolling. So let's start with the I-205. Oh, I'm sorry, next slide, please. I'm actually 2 ahead now. Yep, thank you so much. As you're all aware, the supplemental, there's a supplemental EA underway for I-205. With this adjustment and the necessity for a supplemental, they've reduced the scope to the project. Basically, reducing that scope of the project on I-205 down to the Abernathy Bridge and the tolling of that bridge. We have not seen this revised supplemental. As with the original EA, we will be reviewing that, not only internal with technical staff, also our consultants, and coordinating with our regional partners that are out there. And as like the last EA, submitting comments with comments, questions, and concerns that are raised by ourselves through that review. We are uncertain if we've submitted comments to the original EA. You're very aware of that. We actually have put in a formal request to ODOT again through council, outside council, to raise comments, questions, and concerns about whether or not they're going to respond to us. That still is uncertain, but we're doing our best in pressing the buttons where we may need to. And then last but not least, as you are readily aware of, this project is moving quickly. And so there's going to be more information here in the upcoming weeks about process improvements. We'll check in with the board and update you on those, but there will be more information to come. Okay? With that, I'm going to hand it over to Mike Besner, and Mr. Besner is going to have a discussion with you regarding RMPP.
All right, thank you. So RMPP is one of the two toll projects. It's the Regional Mobility Pricing Project. Basically, it'll be doing congestion pricing on all of I-5 and 205 between the Boone Bridge and the Columbia River. The toll rates would be set on a schedule. So that at times of day when normally more people are using the road, the rates will go up. And at times in the middle of the night, there's a potential it'll be zero. They haven't made that determination yet, but it would be lower. They're talking about having a low-income toll program available on day one of tolling, but we don't have any details on that. It's just what they've been saying. They're aiming for this toll project to begin around the same time that they're aiming to have the Abernathy Bridge toll begin, which is the beginning of 2026. There is a regional toll advisory committee that Commissioner Savas sits on, RTAC. We love acronyms. So that group is supposed to be reviewing the RMPP evaluation results. They meet on September 18th. And I believe ODOT's intent is that they will get a recommendation on which tolling options should be studied as the build alternative for the RMPP NEPA process. I do want to add one other thing. Technical staff, we've been involved in other groups where they're presenting things to us, and there is a comment period coming up end of August, beginning of September, and for us, and we're going to be re-engaging the same consultant that we engaged for the 205 tolling to help us prepare our technical comments. So we expect to be well prepared for that. Next slide. There's two options they're studying for RMPP. The first one is basically everyone pays a toll to get on the highway. And then if you go through certain high congestion areas, you pay a little extra to go through that area. And so if you go through all the areas, for some reason, if you do this huge loop, you'd pay a toll every single time you go through one of those high traffic areas. For ODOT, they say it's less expensive for them to construct this, but it's more expensive for them to operate it. And you could see there's a strange checkered area or dashed, broken up line where the I-205 third lane would have been. And we're not 100% sure how they intend to handle that at this point in time. So this is option one, and next slide. The two other options they're looking at, these came on a little bit later, are all toll zones. So you don't pay a toll just to get on the highway, but if you enter any of these boxes, you will pay a toll. And again, toll rates will all be scheduled based on congestion patterns, and this one will have a higher capital cost to construct, but a lower operating cost for ODOT to administer. And they have not selected one of these options, and this is part of what these methodologies are, is they've been taking feedback to basically rate all these options to figure out which one they want to move forward with. With that, Jamie's going to talk a little about urban mobility's strategy finance plan.
Thanks, Mike. Next slide, please. Good afternoon, Chair Smith, Commissioners, Administrator Schmidt. So with the finance plan, you've already heard about this, but I wanted to touch on it briefly today. So the governor, as you know, issued a pause on toll collection. When she did that, she asked for a revenue plan to be submitted by July 1st and an implementation plan to be submitted to her by December 15th. Revenue plan was submitted. It is called the Urban Mobility Strategy Finance Plan. Essentially, it is what they can do with the resources they have and anticipate to have, knowing that tolling and toll collection will be delayed. The result of that is an indefinite pause being proposed on I-205, the toll project Phase 2, and the construction of the third lane and the improvements to the Tualatin River bridges. They do intend to complete the earthquake-ready Abernathy Bridge project and finish the supplemental EA for the 205 toll project. Scope shrunk down to look just at that project, and implement tolling to pay for that project. They intend to complete design for the Rose Quarter and do early planning work for the I-5 Boone Bridge project and set up the back office systems to toll, essentially, the RMPP. So that is what they have. That plan went to the OTC in late June, was discussed as a starting point. It will likely evolve in coming months, but we just wanted to provide this information, make sure you all had it, an opportunity to ask questions if you have them. We'll take questions at the end. Next slide, please. I'm going to move on to the messy part of today's presentation, Nexus projects. We've talked a little bit. I think you all are somewhat aware of this. I know Commissioner Savas is painfully aware of this process. It has been challenging to navigate for staff. It's moving very quickly. The idea came up through conversations at the RTAC meetings, the Regional Toll Advisory Committee meetings in May and June. And Commissioner Savas, as Mike mentioned, is a member of that committee. Also, Mayor Bialystowski from West Lynn and Mayor Frank Bubenick from Tualatin are all members, and they're all coordinating and talking. The concept for Nexus projects is that local jurisdictions develop a list of Nexus projects to help alleviate the anticipated impacts of tolling. I want to mention that these are all based on lived experience because there is no data or analysis or modeling for the RMPP available to show what the actual impacts are anticipated to be. And we don't have updated modeling for the 205 project with the new scope. So again, this is all based on lived experience of local jurisdictions, what projects would have a nexus to tolling and could help alleviate the anticipated impacts. So that's the concept. These projects are intended to go above and beyond NEPA required mitigation. But because we don't know what NEPA will require for mitigation, because the EA processes are, in development, jurisdictions are taking the approach to put everything on the list that could be a project that could help alleviate an impact from tolling. So, next slide, please. What is a Nexus project? Well, ODOT came up with the definition. They did introduce this definition to RTAC, but canceled the meeting where RTAC was intended to settle upon the definition, and have intended to work with senior staff to move forward through the next steps of the process. This is the definition as proposed right now, and they're proceeding as though this is final. Just noting that for you all. We did give a lot of input on this, and it was incorporated from a staff perspective, but RTAC never approved it. So I'm going to read it out loud to you. Pedestrian, bicycle, roadway, or other mobility projects that would complement a tolling system on I-5 and I-205 in the Portland metro area by supporting congestion relief on a corridor that may become more congested with the implementation of tolling, or improving access to public transportation, or improving mobility options on a toll highway traffic diversion corridor, and providing access to opportunity or addressing transportation-related disparities and barriers experienced by the toll project's equity framework communities. That is a mouthful, but I want to note it is a very broad definition and gives a lot of flexibility and leeway for staff to show that any project that we would like to move forward as Nexus project could meet this definition. So it's a very loose definition and gives us a lot of room to move as staff. The time frame, next slide please. Trying to fit this all in 20 minutes. Time frame's tight. We're moving quickly. But, sorry, before I move on, I want to call out, there is a definition of corridor that is in the Oregon Highway Plan. This is another level of policy decision that has already been made about what a corridor is. And this is referred to in the definition I just read you. It is defined as the immediate area of impact adjacent to the Price facility, generally within a mile or as defined through the project-specific analysis as being impacted by the project. So I just want to call that out. This is another layer to that definition that isn't explicitly in those words. Next slide, please. All right, time frame is tight. We are moving quickly. Things are changing quickly. Projects are supposed to be due by September 15th. Staff obtained an extension until September 8th. That is so that we can work.
5th to the 8th.
Oh, I apologize, yes. They were due September 5th. We have an extension until September 8th.
8th.
Correct. And I'll get to that in just a moment. I want to note that this is just an overview of the timeline. Things are moving around, but it's generally still accurate. That you see the PTS call for projects. That is the public transportation strategy. It's a list of transit projects that could do the same thing as the Nexus projects, only they're transit. What transit projects could we come up with to alleviate the impacts of tolling? That process has been running separately through a staff group as part of RTAC. So I just want to call that out because it's really confusing, but that's the transit list. You've already heard a bit about that. It is separate from the Nexus projects list. It appears that the PTS list and the Nexus list will somehow be kind of married together through the implementation plan as part of this process, but we're not clear on what that looks like yet. So just sharing that. I know it's a lot, and I'll answer questions. I'm sure you'll have them. Okay, next slide, please. So a more detailed outline of the next steps and schedule. Our approach to this as staff has been collaborative. We've developed that in partnership with all of our city staff in Clackamas County. I think you all know we meet weekly. This staff group is so dedicated. They show up on their lunch hour every week to talk about this and figure out how we can stay together and work together. So our approach that we've developed is to submit projects on one spreadsheet, a tab for the county, a tab for each of the cities. Each of them are generating their own list, and we're putting it all into one spreadsheet. The C4 Toll Strategy Committee talked through this process earlier today. Didn't get any direct feedback, I believe, on the process that we're using. They seem supportive of that approach. And this will go to C4 after it's completed. So it's going to go in the packet for the C4 meeting on September 7th, where it will be discussed. And then again, the extension staff got was until the 8th. So the next day after the C4 meeting, it is intended that this would be submitted. We also have held time at issues on September 6th to come back and speak to you about the list if you would like to direct us to do that. Next slide, please. Oh, I'll just wrap up really quickly by acknowledging tons of coordination going on. I know this is my job, so I always tend to bring this up, but I wanted to let you know, not just local staff coordination around this, regional staff is working really hard to stay together as well. ODOT, at the request of RTAC and many of our electeds, have formed an RTAC staff working group. We have met 3 times in 3 weeks. Lots of meetings going on. That group is where every RTAC member has a staff person that can come to that meeting and talk about the process. And I want to acknowledge that ODOT has been working to be more collaborative with staff. An example of that is concerns being raised about what is the purpose of this implementation list about this projects list, the Nexus project list, and how are you going to use it? We all have that question, and it's unclear. But we're really concerned about them taking that list and doing something with it that we're not comfortable with. So that staff group has been a place to talk about that. And at our meeting yesterday, they committed to talking through that with us. They committed to not bringing any sort of a prioritization process forward to RTAC before their next meeting or at their next meeting. So at the next RTAC meeting, they'll get the list of everyone's projects, but it will not be prioritized. And then they'll talk with staff about prioritization, if we're going to do that or not, and when. So we have seen more flexibility from them in partnership, and they also agreed that if and when prioritization happens, it should be data-driven, so we should wait until we have modeling for RMPP and 205 tolling to do that work. So just wanted to give an example and a shout out to ODOT staff for being more collaborative and for forming that staff group, which is meeting weekly. And with that, I will turn it over to Chris.
Thanks, Jamie. And for a quick legislative update, first recall during this last legislative session, there were two major things that were done. First, the governor put a pause on the collection of tolls until 2026, and then the legislature formed a new special subcommittee on transportation planning. And the intent of that subcommittee is to review the planning and implementation of major transportation projects, with the goal being to ensure transparency and accountability to the public and evaluate effectiveness towards stated goals. So far, that subcommittee has not yet met, but we are confident they'll be meeting this interim to prepare either legislation or recommendations for the 2024 and/or 2025 sessions. And as a side note, we are internally working to prepare for that 2025 session when we are confident there will be a transportation package. You, I believe, know that there are two members of the Clackamas delegation on that special subcommittee, Representatives Anessa Hartman and Rick Lewis, and both of them are very attentive to issues of the issue of tolling, as well as the rest of our delegation. But Rep. Hartman even attended the C4 retreat back in June, specifically for the tolling part of that event. We've heard very clearly from all of you and all of our partners this local desire and goal to enhance local participation in the decision-making process of all of this work. And recall that during this last legislative session, our legislators introduced a bill, HB 3416, that included a creation of a task force, including local stakeholders, to help formulate what this entire effort looked like. That bill, along with all the other tolling bills, died. None of them got public hearings. And this new subcommittee doesn't have a clear path yet for what that local involvement may look like. But I say that just to help you understand that we know this is a top priority for you, and we continue to raise the issue at every chance we get. So right now in Salem, folks they're just now coming back from vacation after what was a very contentious session. So we're expecting work to begin picking up in the coming weeks, and anticipate that the subcommittee will be meeting probably during legislative days at the end of September, which is the 27th to the 29th, for their first meeting. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dan.
Next slide, please, in 20 minutes. That's a lot. We've given you a lot of information, and these are a lot of correlation between RMPP and I-205 and this Nexus discussion. We're here to answer questions for you and be an asset for you and making sure you fully understand what's going on. But at its core, we need direction on this Nexus list, okay? And there's a couple options that are presented in your staff report, one of which is, direct us to go out and develop that list consistent with known priorities and concerns for consideration by the board at a future date. That would be September 6th at issues. Next is basically to direct us to develop the list consistent with your known priorities and concerns and just authorize staff to submit it. And last but not least is option C, which basically is direct staff to take no action at this time. So that concludes our presentation. We'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, Gary.
You did that right in 19 minutes. Well done. That was a tremendous amount of information, and the layperson is probably massively confused. However, you gave an update, which is what your task was. Commissioners, I suggest to you, your only question today is, do you want to submit a list or not? And either side has repercussions. If you submit a list, you are basically, in my opinion, perception is you're supporting tolling and you've given up. That's my opinion, if you submit a list. which is contrary to what this board has said before. If you don't submit a list, then we're out in the dark. We're not a part of the process, which appears is going forward anyway. I suggest that's your big question today. So staff wants to know, are they putting a list together or not? And then from there, staff can come back to you after Labor Day.
Well, there's some lights on the dais here, and I do have questions too. I believe Commissioner Savas is first.
Okay. I appreciate your words, Gary. We just got out of a long lunch meeting, and I can tell by my conversations yesterday and today that our partner cities, C4 members, partner cities, are frustrated with ODOT, just like we all are. I have not heard anyone make a nexus to the Nexus projects to us being supportive of tolling. It's not. I think that getting back to the C4 retreat, which my colleagues were all there, and the fact that this new staff group is meeting that Jamie's been a part of has been really powerful and tremendous, because we have the whole region. Matter of fact, one of the Portland City Commissioners called me yesterday. We've been playing phone tag. So all to say that the fact that we've got all these regional partners and we're coordinating this, and we want to put together we talked about this today even, a letter that qualifies. This is in no way supportive of it. And by the way, for a number of reasons, we don't really agree with the process that ODOT is taking on the request for the list, and to qualify what that means. But I haven't heard anyone say that it's supportive of tolling, or we should have a perception of it, because everything we've published thus far has been quite contrary to that. But I do also want to remind everyone that this board has sent, and I've been continuing the message of that we support not congestion pricing, but
Managed lanes.
pardon?
Managed lanes.
Managed lanes, the express lanes, there we go, express lanes, where one lane's tolled, generates revenue, and there's free lanes. We have put that in writing, we have submitted that. So is that a form of tolling? Technically, it is. And I just want to make it very clear, we've been trying to be consistent with that. So I'll just stop there, happy to answer any questions, but I don't agree, Gary, that it's a throw in there because of a few of those nuances there.
You have other commissioners? Commissioner Shaw.
Yes, I'm looking at your slide that has the definition of a Nexus projects. And for the life of me, I can't come up with a list in my head that's going to do these things. I mean, your tolling and your diversion is happening around one point over a line, the line being the river, the point being the bridge. And the only way you can really alleviate the diversion and resulting congestion from people wanting to leave the freeway and avoid the tolls is by providing some other means to get across a river. That's the whole point of this I-205 in the bridge. So unless you can come up with alternatives other than going 5 miles to the south to the ferry, or 5 or 6 miles north to the first bridge you come to, any project, anything that you come up with this definition of a Nexus project is, to me, just like treading water. If that makes sense to you, Mike?
It does. The Nexus project list, though, is for the entire RMPP project, so all of I-5 and all of 205 tolling, not just the Abernethy Bridge. But if you focus in on the Abernethy Bridge, yeah, it's challenging. Like, what do you do? And we have some ideas that could do something, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you it makes it all better. Yeah. But the whole Nexus, it's way bigger than just the bridge. It's the whole stretch of 205 and 5.
Yeah. Okay, one more comment on the Nexus project idea. Somebody says it might be caving into the tolling. Somebody else suggests that it won't be. What do you think?
Well, our staff recommendation was option A, right? Yeah, option A. So our recommendation is to submit a list, and it could certainly be done with a well-worded qualifying letter.
With a what?
Okay.
As Commissioner Savas mentioned, a letter that qualifies it.
Okay, well, best of luck with that. Thank you.
Well, a qualifying letter is not unlike our transportation tolling value statement. At the very end, where I was accused of supporting tolling, at the very end, I said, this is not in support of tolling, so you can't have it both ways, Commissioners. You can't accuse one person for supporting tolling because they issue a statement and then come back here today, a year and a half later, and say, oh, no, I support this, but no, I'm not supporting tolling. So express lanes, if you support express lanes, for instance, one lane not being tolled, in a way, we are supporting tolling. I mean, you can't get around it. Unless you say absolutely no to everything, pick up your marbles and go home, but we're in this horrid, horrid situation. And I'm going to finish up in a minute, Commissioner West.
I really want to be respectful of previous board decisions. I've never voted to support any tolling of any kind on the freeways and highways my grandfather already paid for. So I want to make that clear for me personally. I don't support tolling right now in any capacity. I have not been convinced of that. I just want to make that clear. However, can you please explain to me, make it, I don't know, simple if possible, you have the Nexus list and then another transportation list to people that are not into this soup that sounds like a bunch of bureaucratic extras and not like streamlined and concise. Can you help me understand those two lists a little better before I make my next comment?
Absolutely. Commissioner West, public transportation strategy list and the Nexus project list. Those are the two lists. The PTS list contains transit projects that could help alleviate the impacts of tolling. So have to be transit projects. The Nexus list is anything that is not a transit project that could help alleviate the impacts of tolling.
So, but on the definition, it says roadways, doesn't public transportation list include roadways?
It does, but they're separating those two out to create two different lists, and they've used two separate processes. But we're thinking it will be blended together at some point, that it could be a Nexus project, but it's a transit project, but they're coming in two separate lists. It's just really complicated and big, so they broke that apart to do two separate lists.
Okay, and I don't mean to sound prickly, but this topic makes me a little prickly. I'm gonna tell you how I feel about the Nexus list, and my concern is, I cannot at all imagine any scenario where they can create a nexus that alleviates the real problems that tolling's gonna bring to Clackamas County. I don't know, like build the third lane and don't toll us and come up with a different solution, probably best for Clackamas County. But I don't know what special project they're going to, could ever be proposed that'd be nothing more than a few crumbs from ODOT to appease us and to maybe make us go away than to actually like addressing core issues around our transportation. So I have a problem with the concept of this Nexus list. And then my other concern is all too often, if we do these regional, like when they do have to prioritize, because we do not have the money to do a lot of these special Nexus programs or whatever that could easily be someone's pet project from their community. We don't have a lot of funding for that, so I often see Clackamas County already left with table scraps when we're at that table. I'm concerned that this is a futile effort in trying to nibble around the edges of something that's chronically already broken. I don't know, do you guys believe that we actually have real Nexus-type programs that we can investigate that would magically change everything and make this palatable? Do those exist within Clackamas County? Is that even a reality?
Let's have Dan answer your
Everything was
question.
great until the palatable part. Real quick, just for the public's benefit, I want, and in response to Commissioner Souls, these are not mitigation projects, these are Nexus projects, number one. Number two is the fact that we are reacting to the directions and the requests from Oregon Department of Transportation. This is the game we're playing in, okay? Will we come up with a list? Heck yeah, we'll come up with a list. and it'll be a big list, and it'll be everything in the kitchen sink list.
Okay.
And I think that it's important for us also within that list that we develop, or within this qualifying letter, to talk about the fact that, to echo the concerns in the commission and Commissioner Savas, is, our preference is revenue sharing. Don't you whittle out money to us to do these projects. You give us some money and let us use that money and let us determine where the needs are that we need to spend that money on. We've got pushback on that, but I think that's important. It's important to make sure we continue to echo that, so.
I hear that. So is this almost like throwing everything in the kitchen sink at them to get some, like, this is how absurd and how big of a problem this is, and almost puts a glaring juxtaposition in front of, like a mirror in front and says, hey, look at this, that, like, if you really want to mitigate or have these, I'm sorry if it's not mitigation, my terminology, but if you want to have a nexus to deal with this project, look at what you really have to do. It's not feasible. Is that kind of the storyline we're creating?
We have assumptions and ideas and thoughts around that. There's never been a super transparent discussion that I'm aware of. We're struggling with understanding where this is going, in all honesty, because
Me too.
you have the tolling dialogue, and the tolling isn't enough to pay for mitigation that's needed, and now we've got this nexus discussion going on. And it's like, look at the shiny object over here, and don't be distracted from this. So, but having said that, it's a difficult position to be in. Do you do the list? Do you not do the list? And that's a powerful discussion right there. Do you do the list but qualify the list? That's kind of where we're at. We feel like if we don't do the list, and which we could completely do at the board's direction, not take any action at this point in time, it eliminates us from kind of the discussion going forward to some extent.
I already feel like we're in a discussion that we're not in, really. It's like, what's the difference between nexus and mitigation? Because aren't these things here in a nexus to help mitigate tolling impacts? Sorry if I don't.
Go ahead.
There's a very technical definition of mitigation within NEPA, within the EA process. And there's qualifying in the methodology, what qualifies as an actual mitigation for the federal government.
Okay,
Anything above and beyond that
is the nexus.
is the nexus.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
yeah, you said it right. Mitigation comes out of the NEPA process. It's part of the document, and if it's a mitigation project, they are required to do it.
Okay,
Nexus, we don't know yet, and that's the other reason why the kitchen sink approach, because we're not 100% sure how they're going to use it, what they're going to apply, how they're going to choose, and so we don't want, if we did a list, we don't want to limit it too much, because what if we miss the mark in the
yeah.
end?
If you're going to give me a general, very general, wide open door with a definition, we're going to walk through that door.
Okay,
And we're going to throw everything on that list, so.
I just wanted to add, all of our regional partners will be submitting lists. It is confirmed that all of the counties and all of the cities within the counties are working together to submit projects.
is our nexus submitted with all 16 cities and us in one big unified report, or is each 16 cities supporting their own list and we, on top of what we're doing?
So we're coordinating
That's that
weekly.
spreadsheet.
Yeah, we've
That's
got a
the
spreadsheet,
spreadsheet.
and
Yeah.
actually, originally it was this intake form, 32 questions per each project, and we were
Oh
like,
my
how are we
gosh.
gonna accomplish this? ODOT was flexible and provided us with a spreadsheet, so we can fill in the spreadsheet. Our plan is to have a tab for the county, a tab for each of the affected cities,
Okay.
and they're building their own lists. So it'll all be in one document so that we stay together, and it will be generated by each city.
Okay, I'm done, Chair. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for the answering my questions.
First of all, I really want to thank staff for all your dedication and hard work on this. I think you really have the same passion as this board up here in trying to figure out this huge headache. I mean, every time we discuss this, I go away and I'm hurting up here because you can never, the minute we think we get our hands wrapped around it, something else is thrown at us from ODOT to yet confuse not only the electeds, but the people paying the toll as well. It's very disingenuous. I don't think that ODOT has any idea what they're doing. I think it's just incompetence, 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 and they're driving it down to the local level to have us make a decision on yet more incompetence. However, our staff is trying to figure out what that is. You know, I talked to Representative Lewis, he's on the subcommittee for transportation and tolling. I talked to him yesterday about that. He is not as, shall we say, optimistic as maybe a report was about this transportation committee doing anything and even convening. because the scuttlebutt that he's hearing is that they're going to keep certain people out of the picture, probably our two representatives from Clackamas County. And yet again, leadership will probably be making the decision. They'll have maybe a one-day get-together. This is your option. It's one option, and you're going to do it. So I'm not particularly hopeful, although we should continue to examine that and put the pressure on. I don't have a trouble making that statement whatsoever because this legislature has not been transparent. They have not wanted opinions from the constituents they serve. They have not wanted opinions from these governing bodies who have to implement this and live through it. So I don't have a lot of faith in our Oregon legislature in doing anything that's cooperative or transparent on the transportation front. And if they were, they would be looking at the I-205 expansion differently. And I've had builders and construction people come to me and say, Tootie, you know, the 2 lanes to 3 lanes, why is that such a problem? They're already there, except for over the Tualatin Bridge. And you know that, Dan and Besner. That 3rd lane is already there. We don't need this wide buffer for the emergency folks to go through. We basically can restripe it. We have our 3rd lane, except we need more improvement at the Tualatin Bridge. And that's nothing that's new. Would ODOT want to look at that? Oh, heck no, they're just holding us hostage. That's one of the easiest congestion fixes in the entire region, and ODOT refuses to look at it through that particular lens. I know they have heard it before. We just don't have any good options for this. If there's no other comments from commissioners, I will accept a motion to approve option A.
So, I'm at Mike or Dan. I read the recommendations, and I thought that one was to direct staff to, yeah, there it is, direct staff to develop a list, whereas option B was develop and submit.
Yeah, so basically just trying to confirm, does the board want to vet the list at issues on September 6th?
Okay, so you want to bring the list back. So just prepare it and bring it to us.
We thought the board would want to see that list before it was submitted.
Okay,
Isn't that option A?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was just confused that maybe you were asking for both, so I heard option A, I'm good with that. So I'll make the motion to recommend option A. Direct staff to develop a list of Nexus projects consistent with known priorities and concerns for consideration by the board at a future date with one amendment, and the amendment is to also prepare a letter, a preparatory letter qualifying what the Nexus, our support or lack thereof of the Nexus projects. You understand what I?
May I ask a question?
Sure.
At the C4 Toll Strategy Group, there was conversation also about a qualifying letter. Would that letter be the same
Yep,
letter that the board would share with C4?
ideally,
Okay,
ideally.
thank you.
2 different hats, but I think we're all on the same page. We're working together.
Okay, seconded.
Commissioner Savas has moved we accept option A, direct staff to develop a list of Nexus projects consistent with known priorities and concerns for consideration of the board at a future date with an additional letter that C4 agrees with, and Commissioner Scholl has seconded that motion. More discussion, commissioners.
Chair, just one comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
This whole, I got to tell you, this whole tolling thing is the most undefined, vague, foggy, smelliest thing I've ever had to encounter in my days. And I wouldn't expect anybody in this county to be able to follow what we're talking about here. Anyway, thank you very much.
Yeah, Chair, I concur with the frustrations I'm hearing amongst us. Commissioner Scholl's comments, others I heard today. Every day it seems there's a lot of frustration. Fortunately, I think again the work that our staff have done and we have done as electeds, working together cooperatively at C4 and greater and around the region, has, I think, somewhat insulated us from some of that I'm going to say the illogical approach that ODOT is taking on this, which does not seem to make any sense whatsoever. So I think, number one, it insulates us. I think we're acting in a responsible, sophisticated way, and I appreciate our staff doing what they're doing again, we'll say staff, all the staff, Oregon City, all the cities, everyone's in this because they see the same thing we do, and it's messy.
Well, it is very messy. It's like ODOT is shirking their responsibilities and putting it on the locals. I think they're hoping that the local governments, we will not be together, that we will fight one another for this project or that project. I don't see that happening in Clackamas County. As a matter of fact, I see that we're coming together quite well. We are quite gelled together on this. Commissioner West?
Before I know how to vote, because I don't, I guess my biggest concern is that by nowhere are we abdicating or laying down or conceding our fight against tolling, that this effort just continues to allow us to be at the table, to continue to be in the conversation for Clackamas's voice, even if it's one that opposes tolling, but in no way are we positioning ourselves as backing away from them. Am I correct in that?
So the letter that was discussed about the qualifying letter, I'm assuming will basically say, we are responding to your request for these projects, but we still stand tight and against and with the values that we established originally regarding tolling, which includes, that this does not affirm or support, something to that effect.
Okay. It feels like, as I learn more about tolling every time, Jamie, you come and present very professionally and do a great job in front of us and the rest of your staff. I mean, you guys are fantastic, but it feels like I'm squeezing a balloon. I feel like I got a handle on over here, and it pops out over here, and I squeeze over here, and it pops, and I squeeze in the middle, and it goes up both ends. I just feel like I'm squeezing on a balloon here, and I can never get a handle of what's actually going on, and that's by design. That's on purpose. And so, this ODOT, the bureaucracy and that bureaucracy and that agency has been just really difficult to deal with. So, with knowing that, I'll support the motion today. I just need to make that very clear, moving forward.
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, one thing I kind of touched on earlier, this afternoon, we also discussed our value statement, the new updated one, and we're going to be talking about that here later this afternoon. But, the original one, which came up today, the original one which we're acting on currently, that was produced months ago, all the cities, including Wilsonville, when you're on the council, approve that. So it's no change there, and it says very clearly, this is not an endorsement of or not supportive of tolling. So
Perfect.
we've had that on every value statement, and that's going to continue.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments before we take the poll? Tony, please take the poll.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl.
Aye.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Staff, I want to thank you yet again for your dedication and passion on this subject. We really do appreciate your good work. It's just a very frustrating situation this entire board and all the jurisdictions find themselves in. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.